If you have podcast guesting on your strategy for 2025 to help grow your audience, then this is the episode for you. I'm going to break down what you need to be doing to be an actual effective guest and make sure you are not wasting your time and the podcast host time. Okay? So you'll find lots of juicy nuggets in here, practical, and also give you some examples of how not to suck. So tune in.
What's up? I'm Angie, and you are listening to Podcast That Pays, the podcast for online business owners who want to grow their business and sell their offers using podcasting. If you like no fluff, tell it like it is advice from a marketing-loving podcast agency owner, you are in the right place. So glad you're here. Let's dive in.
Okay, so buckle up. I promise not to get too shady, but this might get a little bit shady because this is sort of a ranty thing about being a guest on a podcast. Because as someone who has been in this industry for a while and from the production perspective, and also as a consumer of podcasts, I have a lot to say and I have a lot of feedback here. So in the last year or so, I've just noticed that there's a huge boom, and you've probably noticed too, in people wanting to do podcast guesting. And I get it. People want to do it because they don't want to do their own podcast because, damn, it's like a lot of effort. So the next best thing is to be a guest on podcast. However, there are, and what I'm seeing is just a lot of wasted effort. I hate to tell you, but it's not enough just to be a guest on podcast. I hate to be the bearer of bad news and be like, you need a strategy for this. You need a strategy for this. And it's like one more thing to learn. But if you're serious about this as a strategy, if you're serious about this as a way to grow your audience and your business, then you do need to learn. You do need to be honing your craft. You do need to get better. And that's just the reality of anything that you're doing in your business. So this episode is brought to you by listening to a horrible podcast episode that I was editing for a client. No, but seriously. This episode comes from me literally screaming at my computer at a guest that one of my clients had on her podcast because as I was listening, and honestly, the guest is super interesting. The guest has a super interesting story, but the guest was really shitty at shutting up, number one, but the guest was just really shitty at being able to convey that story in a way that was interesting. And so I found myself as I was editing it, screaming, shut up, literally shut up. Anyway, I'm not going to rant too much about it, but this was inspired by it because I thought that I thought that the guest had such a great story and that it could be really impactful. And it was honestly just disheartening because it was just a big miss to me. And that's why I wanted to make this episode, because I want to help you if you're listening to this and you want to be a guest on how you can be more efficient, how you cannot waste your time, how you can actually make this work for you, and how you can actually be interesting, okay? Because listen, all media is, which this is a type of media like social media, podcasts, all of this, it's about grabbing attention and holding attention. And whoever is best at that wins, period. And when you're coming on to someone else's podcast, these people don't know you. How can you stand out? How can you grab their attention? How can you create curiosity? How can you inspire them? How can you make them want to know more about you? How can you make them want to come over and do what you want them to do, which is come over to your side, which is come and follow you? Because that's the purpose of you being a guest, right? Is to grow your audience, grow your influence. So it's not just about showing up and talking, but it's about showing up and being interesting. It's about showing up and grabbing attention, keeping attention, creating curiosity, inspiring, being able to do these things, right? So how the hell do we do all of that? Because it sounds like a lot, but it's not. So I want to talk about this, and I'm going to give you some practical things as well on what you can do so that you can be a good guest and you can really maximize your time and not be wasting your time. Okay? Because to me, this is number one. Like, let's not waste your time. If you've been on podcast and you feel like you don't get a return on investment from being a guest, you're wasting your time. So just a couple things that I'm not going to talk about, but that are still important, which is number one, finding the right podcast to be on. And I will tell you that there is an episode that I did. I'm not sure what number it is, honestly. I will put it in the show notes, that I did with my friend Natalie Kusa, and she teaches podcast guesting, and she also has a done for you service, and I really love, trust, and respect her a lot in this space. You can check out that episode to learn more about how to find the right podcast for you. And also, this would also be a really good companion podcast episode for you to listen to if you are diving in deeper to guest podcasting. I will drop that episode number in the show notes because I do not have it in front of me right now. So with anything with podcasting, the thing that you have to approach this with is a goal, is a purpose. What is your purpose? What is the goal? Why are you doing this? What are you hoping to accomplish from this? How is this working in your business? How is this working for your overall brand strategy? That's number one, that you have to think about. How do you want to be positioned? How do you want people to view you? What is important for them to know? They get one episode with you, this audience. What's the interesting thing? What's the angle about you that stands out, that you want to share and that you want people to know? So you have to go into this with a goal. What is it that you're wanting? Are you wanting to build your list? Is this a long-term, throughout the course of a year strategy? Is this a lead up to a launch strategy where you're being very specific and intentional about your content and about where you're driving people? You know, sometimes I encourage my clients who are just launching a podcast to go on a podcast tour, to be a guest on other podcasts, and that is in itself its own little strategy. So like our goal in that would be that we're promoting our new thing that's coming out. So what do we need to ensure that we are talking about? What do we need to, obviously we need to be talking about the new podcast. We need to have logistical things set up, like on the back end. So when they say, hey, where can our listeners find you? You can say something that actually helps you and ties to your goal. Not like, yeah, just have them come over to Instagram. No. You know what? I'm launching my new podcast in the next month. I currently have, a place where you can come, you can sign up to be the first to know when it launches. And for those people who do sign up before it launches, I have this special gift or XYZ or thing, give us a reason to come and sign up, right? But that's more intentional. So I want you to think about the intention. Where are we driving people? What do we have going on? Are we doing this to promote a specific thing or just a long-term play? If we're trying to build our email list, also, what's a great strategy? What will get the person who is listening over to your email list? What's going to make them move based on your content, based on what you're talking about? And don't be afraid also, when you are a guest, to tell the host, what is the story that you most want to pull out? What is the angle that you are trying to go with? Don't be afraid to say that and say that this is the direction that you would love to go if that's a good fit, and talk about those things in advance. Because I think that that's also important so that the host is on the same page as you. And I'm sure they'd be happy to do that. You're making their job easier. So you need an angle, you need an intention, you need a goal, you need to be really strategic on where you are, funneling people and how this makes sense to your business, how you are tracking this. I mean, this goes deep, deep, deep in a lot of layers, and there's lots of strategy and a lot of things that you could be doing. I'm obviously giving you an overview here. Overview being you have to have an angle, you need to have a strategy, you need to find the right podcast to be on, communicate in advance. And then the part that got me really going was that the guest that I was listening to was just kind of all over the place. And I don't think that she truly understood her own story and the power and like how to articulate it or what points to articulate. She was just kind of all over the place as far as like telling the story. She was going too in depth about things that didn't matter, about things that were like boring. Like you don't want to sit here on my podcast episode and listen to me tell you about, I don't know, what happened when I was in 5th grade and how this like led to this. And like, let me go all the way back to this and let me tie you into, now I'm talking about my sister. And actually when my sister was younger, my sister had her kids. And when she had her kids that she did, like you have to be careful with the rambling and with the how far you're trailing off and be more succinct and make sure that you understand the story. So if you understand the purpose and the story and the angle, this will help you a great deal to not be trailing off on all of these different tangents, because I'm telling you, you have to keep in mind that you are not that interesting. Like, I love you, but you're not that interesting. And people are not going to find that shit interesting. They don't know you. Like, I couldn't even listen to my best friend telling me all these damn stories that don't matter. But what I do like to listen to is like, what is that line in the sand moment? What makes this story unique? What was that turning point? What's the interesting thing that you can pull out that you want to talk about? Those are the things. Okay? So you have to find an angle. You have to find what's happening in your story that ties back to what you want them to do next, or that sets you aside as the authority because you know what? Like, what's interesting about me? Maybe it's, when I'm telling my story, I can talk about why I even started doing podcasting in the first place, which then I would go tell my story of when I started my first podcast. I was making such an impact and people were in my inbox telling me how much that it meant to them. They were making these big, huge life choices based on my podcast. And I just looked around and I was like, you know what? There's so many powerhouse women around me. These people need podcasts. If I can be impactful with just my podcast, think how much more impactful I could be by spreading that, by being the ripple effect, by helping these powerhouse women with these amazing stories and these amazing messages start their podcasts. So I don't go back to, in 2008, I started my first business, and maybe I will if that's relevant. But when I was growing up, I always thought, I might want to do X, Y, Z. Like, I want you to get to the meat of it and the thing that is impactful, if that makes sense. Okay. So please be mindful that people don't know you. People don't care about you. I say that with love. People care about how you can help them. People like to be inspired. People don't need to know every single detail about you. You're not that interesting. But what are the things that happen in your story that pertain to where these people might have been or that they're at? How can you pull those things out? That's what's going to be interesting. That's what people are going to want to know. That's what people are going to respond to. And then on the practical side of this. So I guess here's an activity that you can do. An activity would be to look at so number one, what is it that makes you stand apart in what you do? What makes you different? because you need to lean into that in this interview. So you need to lean into that as a guest. So when you are pitching yourself, when you are whatever, like I could pitch myself and say, hey, and I've even entertained this because I'm really entertaining the idea of only marketing my business through podcasting and then pitching myself to podcasts and talking about it all year next year. So then I'm guest podcasting, and that's interesting. So like people want to hear about that, right? So what is the thing that will be interesting about you that's different? So is it that you are a business coach and the thing that's different about you is some sort of methodology that you have or something? Maybe you're a business coach who made $1 million just on low ticket offers. Maybe you're a business coach who's never done a launch. Like what is that that's kind of interesting? And you can lean into that. And does that play into what program or what thing you might be selling on the back end? So think about what that thing is that's interesting. And then maybe you also write out some of your line in the sand moments that you might have had. So like I have a line in the sand moment of, I quit one of my businesses, went back into working full time. I got kind of sucked back into it. I don't know, 2018, my dad got cancer. It made me rethink a lot of things in life. I remember sitting by the Christmas tree, like doing my evaluations for that year. How you like take inventory of what happened, where you are you any further? And I just remember thinking, damn, I'm the same this year now in December as I was in January, exactly in the same place. And then I was like, damn, I'm exactly in the same place I was 5 years ago. And I hated that. And I vowed to myself into that 2019 would be different. 2019 is the year that I would go after my goals. And so I did. So anyway, that's just an example of like a story, a line in the sand moment for me that made me switch. And I went full-time in my business and have been full-time ever since because I just went all in. And that was the thing. So what are those moments that you can share that are relatable? That was probably relatable to some people. So also practical things. Your sound reflects your brand. How you show up for these calls and these interviews reflects your brand. Please stop coming unprepared. Please stop coming with shitty sound. Please stop talking over the host. Be respectful. I think those are my big things. Like how you show up reflects your brand. So stop showing up like trash. Stop showing up talking in the car. You're not Oprah. Like we would be happy to get Oprah on an interview, even if she was driving in her car. Like we'd be so happy, right? But you're not Oprah. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. But you're not Oprah. You are not just inherently interesting to the rest of the world. There has to be something interesting about you. It's your job to pull that out and to lead with that in these interviews. It's your job to tell the host, this is what I want to be, this is what I want to talk about. This is what I want to be known for. What is the thing that you want to be known for? What's your TED Talk? What's your story? Again, go back and listen to that episode because we talk more about that with me and Natalie. We talk more about pulling your story out. But I don't want you to waste your time. I don't want you to do these things in vain. I want you to be prepared. I want you to be mindful of what is actually effective. I want you to represent yourself and your brand well. And I want you to get results. That's the bottom line. I do want you to get results. So let me know if you have more questions around this. I'm happy to answer them. Come over to my Instagram at Angie M. Jordan and shoot me some questions in my DM. I can do some follow-up episodes or answer them right there in the DMs. I'm happy to talk about it. I know this was like kind of super vague, but hopefully helpful to get your brain going on what you need to be thinking about. And also practice. Like we don't just inherently wake up and are good at these things. Like, we're just not. It takes reps. It takes reps. So don't be upset. Don't overanalyze it. But I do want you to be mindful. So I hope that this helped, and I will see you in the next episode.
Hey, if you enjoyed the show, head over to podcastthatpays.com to get started on your way to creating a podcast that pays. And don't forget to follow this show and take a screenshot that you were listening and tag me on Instagram at Angie M. Jordan. I'd love to meet you and show you some love over there. Thank you so much for being here. I love you. Let's get this money.